Nancy's with the National Coordination Office for NITRD, which she will pronounce NITRD, and that's okay. But that's the Networking and Information Technology R&D Coordination Organization in Washington. So Nancy and her folks, spend a lot of time worrying about kind of big picture issues about how do we coordinate R&D efforts across things happening at the NSF, things happening in other research communities, things happening in industry to produce the most effective outcomes. And Nancy has some thoughts for us on sustainability.
Hello. Okay. Thank you all for inviting me to this. It's really a pleasure. Jeannie has a long and illustrious history, and we at NITRD really want to help them continue that and be a part of that, and give you some ideas about long-term sustainability of the project. So let me give you a little bit of background about the National Coordination Office for Networking and IT Research, NITRD. Let me see, I have a couple slides on this. Okay, yeah, that's good. Okay, for those of you who've never heard about NITRD, and who really don't think about what goes on in Washington a lot, which is fine, but basically NITRD is a governmental organization that was set up by the High Performance Computing Act in 1991. I think the people at the top felt that there was a lot of, and this was just at the beginning of the internet, there was a lot of really interesting IT-related research going on that was funded by government, and that there should be a way to kind of coordinate that and be involved in that and be able to report to the people at top what was going on and to see if they could stay involved in some way. So they created this thing called the Networking and IT Research and Development Organization, and NCO was the National Coordination Office. So we're a real small group of people. We have different, so maybe about 15 people. We have different divisions. We have a big data, we have a cybersecurity, we have video and imaging analytics, we have high confidence software, we have HPC, and basically our role is to work with the different agencies that fund research and networking and IT. I mean, you may just think primarily in terms of NSF, but Defense Department and NIST and Environmental Protection Agency and Department of Homeland Security, and there are a lot of different governmental organizations that fund IT research. So within each area, we have what are called intergovernmental working groups, where you have representatives from the R&D going on in all the different agencies. And they get together and kind of talk about what they're doing and just try and coordinate so there's not too much redundancy. And so they all kind of have a sense of, the kind of research they want to do in the future and their research goals. So we have a budget of about $4.1 billion. We report to something called the NITRD subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the PCAS, which is the President's Council on Science and Technology. I know there's a lot of acronyms. Acronyms abound in Washington. OSTP is the Office of Science Technology Policy, which is now headed by John Holdren. He's the President's Science Advisor, and everything that has to do with science and technology that goes on, they kind of oversee. So we also interface with Office of Management and Budget, obviously, the General Accounting Office, Congress, et cetera. So we kind of have our little tentacles in lots of different places, and we also have accountability to lots of different places. So, okay, I think I've kind of gone through that. We have 16 member agencies. You may not have been aware of how all these places do networking and IT research and put dollars into that. DoD, DARPA, you're aware of, NIST, NOAA. NOAA does a lot of high-performance computing. NSA obviously does a lot of high-performance computing. Office of Secretary of Defense, Energy, and NSA is the National Nuclear Security Administration, which is part of DOE, which administrates all the national labs. DHS, Homeland Security, EPA, and so on. So all of these organizations participate in the National Coordination Office. And as I said, we have interagency working groups for each of our areas. If you're curious, there's a website, www.nitrd.gov, and we list all our organizations, but we really try and stay actively engaged, with governmental IT research. Okay, next. Okay, well, the reason I'm here is to talk to you about sustainability. I know you're all aware that Genie is migrating over from the BBN GPO to kind of a community management and to more of a consortium type organization. And so we've given a lot of thought to how public-private partnerships work for IT research, and the kind of things that help those initiatives remain sustainable for the long term. Eventually NSF is going to start sharing the financial responsibilities for Genie, and so we have some models in mind and best practices that are already being used, and thought those might be of help to you. You might be aware of Big Data Hubs, which is it's an initiative that came out of the White House. It's a consortium, i.e. public-private partnership, where companies and the government and non-for-profits jointly fund these big data hubs to promote R&D for big data. NSF is also using a consortium framework for their future cloud. The idea of this is to start thinking in a new way about organization, about sustainability, about financial resources, and who your stakeholders are. When you're in these kind of structures, you have to start thinking about how do you attract resources? How do you gain legitimacy? How do you attract financial capital, and how do you attract more human capital? So I'm not suggesting you all of a sudden start thinking yourself as a private sector organization where you're in this to make profit, but you kind of have to think of yourself of having stakeholders and how you get those stakeholders to be engaged, get involved, and contribute resources, i.e. money. So we know a lot about ventures. We kind of thought would be useful to you guys to think about Genie as being a new venture. And we know a lot about that. We have a lot of best practices for that. As you can imagine, there are different phases of development. I know the BBN GPO is thinking about that as they enter into this transition phase. But like any kind of startup company or any kind of IPO or any kind of new division of a company, you really have to think about being sustainable for the long term. Otherwise, you're just not going to make it. And they've said that the two main sources of failure for any kind of new venture is not being useful to your customers and not being able to scale up to a larger scale. So. You want to go to the next one? Okay, so all of a sudden you're going to be functioning in this new environment, and you want to think about, well, what does this environment consist of? You're going to have resources out there, which financial, human capital, other kinds of things. You'll have supporters, NSF, the government, people who are cheerleaders for Genie, people who are interested in spreading the word about Genie. You'll have challenges. You'll have technological challenges. You'll have challenges of how do you become involved in other international organizations and test beds. You'll have challenge about sustaining graduate students. You'll have challenges about how do you become marketable to some of these new contributors. And there will be impediments. So you kind of have to start thinking in a more holistic way and looking at who your stakeholders are. How am I doing on time? Okay. What we're presenting to you here is a model that comes out of the Harvard Business School, and it's just to kind of give you an idea of how you might start thinking about the long-term sustainability of Genie. You may have heard of a guy named Michael Porter. He's a very big business strategist, comes out of Harvard Business School, and he has something called the 5 forces model, if you're interested in looking it up. Obviously, this is mostly for companies and companies who are trying to stay competitive in a certain industry, but to some extent, you know, we felt it was applicable to an initiative like Genie, and it helps you conceptualize the environment that you're working in and how all these forces work together dynamically to create a good environment. So new entrants, well, in this case, Genie might be a new entrant into the public-private partnership arena, and you know there may be barriers to entry. There may be learning phases for new entrants. There may be obviously competition for new entrants. So you know those will be one of the forces that are operating on you. Substitutes. I mean, you know, I'm not aware if I'm a potential contributor. You know, are there competitors for Genie? Can I go somewhere else and get these kind of capabilities in test beds? You know, would I be saying, well, should I invest in Genie or should I invest in some other kind of similar organization? So when you think about your stakeholders, you want to think about, okay, what do I have that my competitors don't have that I can offer to potential contributors? You have customers, you have academics, you have graduate students, you have users, and you kind of have to keep them happy too. So they're another factor that are operating on this new environment. And again, I don't mean to suggest you have to start thinking about yourself as a private sector organization, out to make a profit. But there are all these forces that will be acting on you in this new environment, and that will, in some way, have a say in how things operate in the long term. You have your suppliers, your technological suppliers, your, a lot of other people who supply the devices and the technology to keep Genie running. And probably most importantly, you have your investors. You may be aware of an initiative called Metro Lab. It's a consortium run by Carnegie Mellon. It's 14 universities and cities that together invest. It's kind of the smart cities. It's kind of part of the smart cities initiative. But together they put money into developing environments for research and development in smart cities technologies and capabilities. Their first investor was the MacArthur Foundation. So, that might not be an obvious one, but foundations are possible contributors to a public-private partnership like Genie. You can think of venture capitalists, you can think of, government entities and private sector. So, there are all these forces that act on you that will contribute in some way to the long-term sustainability of initiative like Genie. Okay. something that's real important with looking at your stakeholders is to keep them informed. So we have this graph, their level of interest in a project and how much influence and power they have on you. And this kind of lays out how much effort you should expend in keeping them engaged and keeping them informed. Obviously, long-term sustainability is a process. It's not a linear one. As the technological environment changes, as the financial environment changes, as the political environment changes, forward progress may be somewhat of a random walk, although hopefully not. And so you have to constantly think about how do you remain sustainable. And, again, it's like any kind of a new venture. There are a lot of risks and there are a lot of rewards, and you kind of have to think about the challenges that you will encounter at every stage, how you will grow, and again, who your stakeholders are. So in order to remain sustainable, these are the people that we think you have to start thinking about in a holistic way and in a way in which they can influence your operation.
Okay.
A lot of this is going to be a function of governments, and as Mark said, this is a transition time for you, and you're going to be thinking about over the next few months how that will materialize, how it will be organized, who will take on what roles, and how they will work together. But success is really important. There are a lot of factors to it. Government initiatives really do fail. And they fail because they can be over budget, and they fail because they cannot reach the research goals. And it's often not easy to determine how people fail. So you want to build the circumstances that can create an enduring success. And again, think of all the factors that will be influencing that and finding a way to communicate with them, finding a way to convince them that they should invest in Genie. And this is a really important project as you think about new initiatives like the Internet of Things and smart cities and Internet 2. I mean, Genie can really be instrumental in building those things. And, NITRD really sees a big role for Genie in getting involved in those kind of things. So the challenge for new management will be starting to think about these things in a holistic way and figure out who their stakeholders are. So that's kind of our take on things. We're hoping to stay involved and to give you some ideas and to share our experiences with other private sector, public-private partnerships. So thanks. It's really great to be here.
Thank you.